Good afternoon and welcome to the EVGEN Pharma PLC Post-AGM update and Q&A session. Throughout this recorded meeting, attendees will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question submitted today. However, all questions will be reviewed with responses published on the Investor Meet Company platform where it is appropriate to do so. I'd now like to hand you over to Hugh Jones, CEO. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for attending. Welcome to our results and AGM summary presentation here from Alderley Park in Cheshire. The normal caveats apply, of course, in that we are a public company listed on AIM. We're clinical stage. Our focus is drug development. We focus on breast cancer, glioma, a number of other cancers, and we have three very powerful molecular targets of interest, which the sulforaphane released by SFX01 tends to target. So it's a new class of pharmaceuticals based on a biologically and very well-researched ingredient called sulforaphane. Multiple targets, multiple areas of medicine, and we focus on those high-value niches that we believe can make a difference in medicine and make a difference to our shareholders. There's a huge amount of preclinical third-party data and some substantial clinical data too on sulforaphane derived from a bunch of other sources. However, we are the only clinical grade of sulforaphane in the world. People come to us when they need a sulforaphane that's suitable for clinical work. We have high unmet need diseases, and the way we stabilize sulforaphane is called Sulforidex. That's our platform technology. The lead compound under that technology is SFX01. We've got very strong, granted in many territories, IP covering the composition of matter, the manufacturing, and various other derivatives of sulforaphane, sort of owning the space. The board and management have probably got 200 years of experience cumulatively. It's a very experienced group, and that makes really high-quality decision-making much easier to do. Our business model is to get proof of concept, be that preclinical or clinical, and then partner for the large-scale trials and commercialization. And we believe we've got a lot of value inflection points in our portfolio coming up in the future. In fact, we've proven that business model with two deals so far. One using the Sulforidex platform in the nutraceutical world, and that's with Juvenescence, or the nutraceutical arm of Juvenescence, Juve Life. And that collaboration has been going on for a couple of years, still continues with expected launches predicted in the paperwork and RNSs you've already seen. A more recent collaboration is with Stalicla, a Swiss company, and that's for the part of SFX01's wide range of properties that cover neurodevelopmental disorders and schizophrenia. And that partnership starts with autism spectrum disorder. And Stalicla, as we've said a few times before, are pretty much the only people who could do this because they've got a proprietary screening platform based on AI that makes the clinical study that we're planning together more likely to succeed because it picks those people with autism who are more likely to respond to SFX01 than those who are less likely or not responding to SFX01. And as the period that we're reporting today, we've got a very strong cash position compared with some of our peers in the marketplace. As of 31st of March, we had 5 million in the bank. That gives us a cash runway to the end of 2024. Again, if you look at the stats, that's a remarkably long upper quartile performance of biotechs in Europe. So the pipeline I was mentioning is shown here, all on SFX01, and the collaborators that we deal with are also shown on this slide. Breast cancer is an important area for us. We're continuing to work with the University of Manchester and the Christie Hospital in really deconvoluting the best place to put SFX01 in the increasingly complex world of breast cancer treatment, particularly in the metastatic setting, mainly in the HER2 negative, if you're technically minded, and the hormone receptor positive metastatic breast cancer, which is the largest subgroup. Neurodevelopmental disorders is a new chevron on this slide. That's because we did the deal with Stalicla last October, and the phase 1 study that supports that is complete. We reported top-line data from that quite recently. Glioblastoma is our internal program, and we've reported some very good news on that program also very recently as the last 10 days or so. And that's currently in a partnership with the Erasmus Medical Center in Rotterdam. We've got data on hematological malignancies that we're figuring out what to do with, and with a bunch of Spanish academic institutions, we've got rights to analogues of sulforaphane that we're looking at exploiting in due course. So the highlights then from the year we're reporting to, and by the way, on the right-hand block there is our commercial grade tablets that were manufactured for our phase 1 healthy volunteer study. We did a transformative transaction for SFX01 with Stalicla. Just to remind you, that's milestones of $160.5 million during the lifetime of the deal, and in any and every scenario, a double-digit royalty accruing back to EVGEN from eventual sales in autism, neurodevelopmental disorders, schizophrenia. We've already received $500,000 of that earlier on this year, and during the next 18 months, we fully expect to realize another $5.5 million, which completes the early milestones under that collaboration. But you can see there's $155.5 million still to come during the development and commercialization of SFX01 in those indications. We spent a lot of money, again, on manufacturing in the last year. We've made a new form API, which is covered, that's active pharmaceutical ingredient, by the way, which is covered by additional patent protection. We've made, as you can see on the right-hand panel, 300 milligram tablets, which are made to good manufacturing practice, suitable for human use and eventual commercialization. And we used those very tablets in the phase 1b healthy volunteer trial that has completed quite recently. We decided in combination with our sort of key opinion leader group to conduct the first SFX01 glioblastoma, our internal program study, as an investigator-sponsored study led by Marjolaine Geertz at the Erasmus University Medical Center in Rotterdam. And we applied during the period for a non-dilutive grant to fund both the preclinical lead-in to that study and the clinical study itself in patients with glioblastoma. We never stopped, though, on academic collaborations, so long as that collaboration is within our core area of interest. So we also published in March evidence of radiosensitization by SFX01, that is, making radiation more powerful or enabling lower doses of radiation for the same therapeutic effect. This was in vitro, this was in test tube, in a collaboration we have with the University La Sapienza in Rome. And we published this enhancement of the effect of radiotherapy by SFX01 in the test tube at an ESMO Rare Diseases Conference in Lugano, Switzerland, right at the end of March, right at the end of the period. So we also finished the phase 1 PK/PD study in the period. That is, we completed the dosing. There were no serious adverse events. The release of the drug and metabolites were as predicted. We've targeted pH 6.8, which is just beyond the stomach, into the intestine where the drug is meant to be absorbed. And we found that exactly to be the case from the timescale of the drug appearing in the blood, and indeed its metabolites. So exactly as predicted. And what we call the total thiols, that is the total active sulforaphane and active metabolites of sulforaphane in the body that are biologically active, we call that in the micromolar range. So if you're a scientist, the micromolar range is what we see in the lab. We're very pleased to say that we see the same range of concentration as we see in the test tube in the human subject. So that means we're getting into blood the same kind of concentrations that we see being effective in the lab. So great news from the point of view of our drug delivering in the right place with no SAEs, serious adverse events, and producing the right level of blood concentration that we expect to see efficacy. So post-period, we completed the pharmacokinetic part of our healthy volunteer study. We're in final review of that study right now. We've shared it with our partner, and they're busily calculating the dose for the autism spectrum disorder study they plan to start early next year. So those will trigger, of course, other royalties and other milestones. On manufacturing, we've enhanced substantially the way we make the active ingredient to make it more effective, to generate effectively more active ingredient per kilo of starting material. That's gone very well. And we're transferring that to our contract manufacturer as we speak. In fact, they've replicated those effects in their pilot lab, and it's looking good. The good news on our GBM study is that the grant we applied for was very successful. I've been asked a couple of times, what's the value of that? Well, the project, which is preclinical and the clinical study in GBM patients, is about 1.1 million euros or around 900,000 pounds sterling, which is a very substantial piece of work that we don't have to pay for. We provide drug and expertise, and the rest of the work is provided into the Erasmus Medical Centre by the Dutch Cancer Society. In fact, we had a kick-off meeting only yesterday with our collaborator there, Professor Gertz, who was very pleased to come to Alderley Park in Cheshire, come and start the programme, and the formal grant programme starts on the 1st of October 2023. So all on plan, and we're looking forward to seeing the results of that collaboration, including eventually clinical results. The radiosensitization piece in this rare childhood tumour, rhabdomyosarcoma, continues on with our collaborators in Italy, in Rome, and we've seen a replication of the effect we saw in the test tube, that is, making radiation more powerful, or even turning cells that were beginning to develop resistance to radiation back to be sensitive to radiation. That's really exciting data if it translates into the clinic. People whose radiotherapy stops working can be hopefully one day given SFX01 and that radiotherapy starts working again, or indeed when they're giving radiotherapy first, the radiotherapy is more powerful on the tumor than it would have been without SFX01. So the great news from the La Sapienza group is that they've validated the stuff we saw in the test tube in whole mouse models. So there's consistency here from the test tube to the preclinical model, and we're looking at the next stage of that collaboration. We're going to publish jointly with La Sapienza in early 2024. The publication, I think, takes quite a while, of course, if you're going to a properly peer-reviewed, prestigious journal. The study, the phase 1b study, is very close to being finished in a QA point of view. Now, I have to explain to folks who aren't breathing and living phase 1 and 2 studies all the time. There's an execution period of the study, which is a quick period. There's a huge amount of data to measure, and we're measuring PK data, that's how the drug gets in the body, and PD data, that is what the drug's doing when it gets there. We've got some very exciting PK data, as I said earlier, and we're processing now the PK data. All of this, because it's being done to regulatory standard, takes multiple rounds of approval and review to check that the data we're sending to regulatory authorities eventually is bang on and absolutely correct. Not a single typo, not a single decimal point out of place. That's what we're doing now. The PK data review is complete, and we're finalizing the tables and listings, which is clinical trial speak for the data within the study. I just wanted to dwell on the right-hand panel there for a bit on some data that was published by the Rome Sapienza group in March at that ESMO conference. GY stands for gray. You'll see that on the vertical column there. That's the dose of radiation. Vehicle is like placebo. So these are cells in a plate with zero radiation applied. That's a rhabdomyosarcoma cell or group of them with nothing applied. On the right-hand panel, you'll see SFX01, and you can see a massive difference between no treatment and SFX01 in terms of shrinkage of the size of those sarcoma cells and the reduction in number of them. And then in the bottom left panel, 4 gray means a standard dose of radiation. You can see that it does work. We've got fewer and smaller cells in the presence of radiation alone. And these are radio-resistant cells, so the effect is not 100%. It's starting to show difficulty in radiation being effective. And the killer panel for me, killer as in absolutely conclusive evidence, is the bottom right. That shows 4 grades of radiation applied concomitantly with SFX01. And you can see a picture tells 1,000 words. The fantastic continued shrinkage of those cells and reduction in number of them. That excites us greatly in these cells that are beginning to develop resistance. So it excited our professor in Rome even more. So this quote was put out in our press release, and he says the systemic therapy of rhabdomyosarcomas hasn't changed in recent decades, and the frequent finding of local regional recurrences, that is the tumor coming back, suggests the need for radio-sensitizing therapies that increase local control. Unfortunately, with sarcomas, this is rarely obtained in vivo, and precisely for this reason, I'm very excited to observe this result. He sent us that in an email, and we asked him, would he be kind enough to let us put it in the public domain? He said, of course, this is really exciting data. So we're continuing to see radiosensitization properties of SFX01 that will, in fact, have a real role in the clinical study in brain cancer, because the second-line treatment after surgery of brain cancer is radiation. So the goal, the dream for the product here is making radiation more effective and getting a better outcome for the patient. So to the outlook then, what are we looking forward to for the rest of this year and into next? We're going to get the full data set from the healthy volunteer study very shortly, and we are submitting that for publication because we believe that the data are so interesting, and they are actually the most complete set of data about sulforaphane and its molecular targets in the world ever. So it's worthy of publication. More news on that as we submit for publication. On the 1st of October, the very first day of Q4, the grant-funded project in brain cancer starts at the Erasmus Medical Centre in Rotterdam. We're going to get more preclinical data from our colleagues up the road in Manchester on metastatic breast cancer. We'll get an initial set of data from our earlier collaboration with the University of Michigan in colorectal cancer, and that's a cancer that we haven't really researched extensively before. That's on a longer timeline, but we do expect to see some early data this year. The in vivo work from Professor Morampon's group on that radiosensitization in the rare tumor rhabdomyosarcoma, we expect that to be submitted for publication this year and accepted for publication early next. With our partner Stalicla, the next bullet, start of our ASD phase 2 trial in 2024, triggering a number of other milestone payments that you can see here for the rest of this year and into 2024. So pretty exciting outlook, both technically with our collaborators and financially with our commercial partners. So to the financial highlights, Richard, we've got the P&L loss, so the cash flow, cash position, and what we previously said as our cash runway. Over to Richard.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of operating loss, as you can see, it's getting on for 2 million higher than last year. And that is a consequence of running a clinical trial where most of the costs were incurred during the last financial year. And clinical trials, as you know, are not cheap, but it also reflects the additional work we've been doing on the production and the development of a production process for our SFX01 capsules and tablets. So that is fundamentally the reason for the increase in loss. There's no other particularly large contribution to that. And consequently, because essentially what we do in the P&L basis is reflected pretty accurately in the cash flow. You can see that the cash flow the cash outlay was 1.5 million in the current year, higher than it was in the last year. And again, as I say, that is a consequence of the work we've been doing on the clinical trial and the production process. It's not quite the same because there are timing differences, because there was also a tax credit we received, which you don't include in operating loss, and that was getting on for 500k. So you can see that for the most part matches the P&L. So as at the end of the year, we had 5 million, and that is not rounded, that is a real number, sort of rather attractive for a finance person. And the projections tell us that will fund us through to Q4 2024 without taking account of most of those milestones that Hugh has talked about. So were we to get more substantive milestones from Stalicla or from Juvenescence, then our cash flow takes us way into 2025. So we're comfortable that we have a good cash position for the time being, and certainly enough to execute on our glioblastoma work and complete the work on the clinical trial. So I think that's all I have to say on the financial highlights.
Thanks, Richard. So that concludes the formal presentation part in a fairly rapid fire way. Please do ask any questions on these slides or anything else using the Investor Meet platform. So
perfect. Hugh, Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. As you can see, we received a number of questions today, and thank you to all the attendees for submitting those questions. Hugh, if I could just hand over to you just to read out those questions and give responses where it is appropriate to do so, then what I'll do is I'll pick up from you at the end.
Thanks, Alessandro. So we have pre-submitted questions to start. The first one, please confirm the issued shares in EVGEN which are held by senior management. So Richard and I did some arithmetic when this question came in, and I can tell you that 7% of the equity of EVGEN is in one way or another in the hands of the board and management. 7%. That makes board and management the fourth largest shareholder in EVGEN. So we are highly committed to this mission, and we're highly committed because we're devoting all our working lives to it. But not only that, we have to behave like shareholders and like shareholders wish to see again, because we are indeed shareholders. I've bought personally and have other share instruments, of course, to reward me for share price performance and vice versa. So we are hugely committed to this mission, to this fantastic multifactorial agent, and to producing a return for shareholders. It is biotech, returns take a while. The market's not a happy place, but we've been here before. I'm old enough to remember several cycles of this sort of thing before, and you do come out of it, especially when we've got data and plans as exciting as I believe the ones we've got are. So fourth largest shareholder if you look at everything in the round. The next question, and this is lots of talk about how AI is used by companies in drug development to accelerate the process. Are we using AI? Well, we're clinical stage, so the sort of AI we're using is really looking for patterns in data, things like the pharmacodynamic data that were in the phase 1 human volunteer study. But the most powerful place for AI in EVGEN's business is the AI that Stalicla have to filter out those young people with autism who are going to respond to SFX01 versus those who won't. There's no point giving a drug to a person with a particular condition where it's not going to work if you know it's less likely to work, and more importantly, know where it is more likely to work. That's the person to administer to the drug to. That's another key rationale, apart from financial, that we did the deal with Stalicla. Looking at it broadly, well, this isn't a kind of industry overall kind of crystal ball read, but I see its value both in discovering new molecules more quickly, the ability for AI to make connections that a human person either can't do or takes much longer over is really exciting to me in drug discovery, and using AI as well to interrogate really large volumes of data. We've got some of those, as I said, from our human volunteer study in the pharmacodynamic piece. We haven't disclosed any of that data yet, but using really sophisticated analytics, which is really what AI is, excites us greatly in getting huge insights from what the drug is doing. The next one is the expected 5.5 million in 2024 included in the cash runway, or does this extend it further? I'll take this one, Richard, if that's okay. 500,000 of it is. That's the next milestone on delivery of the phase 1 data in its fully wrapped up form. They've got the raw data already, but delivering a report to our partner triggers a 500,000 milestone, and the rest of the 5 million are regulatory milestones. So only 500,000 of that is recognized in our prediction for our cash runway. Richard, any other comments there?
Yeah, only that. Yeah, so I should also have rejuvenescence milestones, which would hit a 7-figure number within the next 12 months. We would hope, if all goes well. Those aren't in there either.
Great, thanks for reminding us of that. The next one is a thank you, which is very nice to see. Thank you to the person who sent us that question, and it thanks Richard for his stewardship. And I'd like to add I was going to do this at the end, but I might as well do it now. I was going to add my personal thanks for Richard's fantastically professional work on behalf of this organization and its shareholders. When I joined 2.5 years ago, he made my integration incredibly smooth and easy, and he's been continuing in that vein as a member of the board and management team. He makes it look easy, and that's the mark of a real pro. Thank you, Richard. It's been a real pleasure working with you.
Thank you. That's very embarrassing, but thank you.
And the next question, have we found a replacement to take on the role? We've been interviewing for most of this year, and of course, we're not pushovers, so we've found some very interesting candidates. We're in late stage interview stage at the moment. So yes, we've got a few replacement candidates, 1 or 2 in particular, who are in very late stage discussions for taking over the role. But in the interim, we've got an interim solution locally here, a sort of virtual FD solution from the people who've been working with already in EVGEN to do some of the more minor financial piece, and they're stepping up to do a more major financial work with us in the interim short period before we appoint a new CFO. So the next one, given our progress in market cap, is the company not vulnerable for takeover? This comes up quite often, actually. And the answer is it's the market's decision, not ours. I mean, if there was a takeover, we'd have to be obligated at the right point to tell you about it. I can tell you now there are none. We are continuing with our plan, and that is to develop SFX01, to develop our internal program, to nurture our partnerships. But, you know, takeovers could happen at any time. There are not many happening in the market as it stands today, frankly. And we are, you know, a fully functioning clinical stage biotech with some big inflection points coming down the pipe. So no offers. We're continuing with our plan and pushing forward. New grants. Well, that's a very good question. Thank you. The next question. We're always looking for opportunities, be they product opportunities or be they non-dilutive funding opportunities. We're in touch with 2 other grant funding bodies in the brain cancer space and others too. The management team here have a very good history of attracting grant money over the last decade. Myself and our CBO in particular, and now our CMO, who led the Dutch Cancer Society grant. So can we expect them? Well, we're always looking, is the honest answer. And we're talking to the key people in our areas of interest to see whether there is even more grant funding available than the 900K or so we've secured already this year. So next one, published readout from the phase 2 metastatic breast cancer trial. Well, that's already published, as in the sense that the phase 2A study was done and completed. We're still looking for partnership to do the very large scale studies that are necessary. So we won't be doing that ourselves. It's a very large, very expensive study to do. So we're looking for larger partnerships for metastatic breast cancer, because the next study is a real biggie. And we're continuing to do that. Helen, our CBO, and I are very busily looking for partners there. We're in discussions, of course, but biotech companies are always in discussion with various parties to exploit our technology going forward. And when there is news, we'll be the first to tell you. When you issued options, did not disclose the terms. Are we including options as part of the 7% we talk about? Yes, we are. The terms are like standard options. They're based on time. They're based on competitive performance. They're based on achievement of corporate objectives. So there's a lot of objectives to achieve in the vesting of a share option in EVGEN.
Yeah, it's also worth adding most of the options issued are also have to beat certain share price milestones, hurdles, which in this market is pretty demanding.
Thank you. You know, some of these are at a strike price, so we have to achieve this price before they're even in the money. So yeah, we're very motivated by the share price in this organization, I can tell you. We don't pay ourselves at the top of the table of biotechs, far from it. So we're very motivated for future gain one day in the shape of our share LTIP. So there's somebody saying, since you said you wished you could buy shares last October, it appears you have not. Why did you mislead investors? Well, let me tell you, sir, I am not misleading investors. We're not misleading you at all. When we say we can't buy, that's because of the advice we get from our nomad, our broker, and our lawyers. And that is still the case. We wish we could. And to a man in this room today at our office, we wish we could. We can't. We're still prohibited from doing it. And I can tell you now, in a biotech company, closed periods are very, very long. There's always a discussion going on or not going on. We're already discussing the pharmacodynamic data from our phase 1 study, which could be deemed in certain circumstances to be price sensitive. So we can't buy. It's not that we're misleading you. We're telling you honestly every time you ask that we cannot buy by the advice coming from our very experienced advisors in the city and our lawyers. We just can't do it. We'd love to. I bought originally when we raised our raise in 2021. I used my own cash then, and I will use it again when I have the opportunity to do so. Unfortunately, we can't tell you what might or might not be going on or the reasons why we can't buy, but that sadly is just the case. How many employees do we have? We've got 7 and a board, but each of those is a hub in a wheel. And that wheel consists of a number of other research institutes, contract manufacturing organizations, contract research organizations. So we're a hub and spoke virtual company. That's the sort of company jargon for it, really. We all have our own projects, we all manage them personally, and we draw in expertise from wherever we find it, be it in academia or be it in the commercial contract research and manufacturing world. That makes us agile, it makes our capital very flexible, makes us capital efficient, so that when we turn something on, we can turn it on for the period we want it, and then we can stop doing that work, move on to the next thing. It's an ideal model for a biotech, given the quality of both academic collaborators and industry collaborators that we have. So small, beautifully put together, we think, and working very flexibly and efficiently with a very large number of suppliers. What option percentage do you own? I haven't calculated it, to be honest. So I can't tell you, but we maybe follow up with a question there. Clearly, I'm the largest option holder currently because I'm the CEO, but I just don't know. It's nowhere near the full 7%, I can tell you, sir. How long will the next breast trial take? That's the next question. How many patients will be required? Well, we haven't revealed that to the market. We have calculated it, and it will be tens, if not hundreds, of patients to find a definitive result in the metastatic breast cancer area, and that's simply a statistical power calculation. We've said before it could cost between $30 and $50 million to execute that study, and that's why we're looking for partnership. We wouldn't dream of starting to do that by ourselves because we couldn't finish the job. It's a partnership thing with really interesting data in this whole area of post-CDK4/6 treatment. So that's currently when the ladies with breast cancer see that breast cancer spreading and those breast cancer biomarkers move in a certain direction, that's when CDK4/6 inhibitors are deployed. And then after that, they start waning in their effectiveness. That's where we think we are likely to fit in. And we're looking for external non-dilutive ways to deliver that. We're constantly getting interesting and intuitive data from the Manchester Breast Centre. So when we complete that work, we'll have a very clear idea of where to go. And of course, a partner, if it happens, would also have a clear idea and ideas of their own about where that would go. And we're looking for a partner who could afford to fund it. And I think that's the last question that I can see here. So
yeah,
thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And I'll hand back to Alessandro.
perfect. Thank you very much for that. And I think you've addressed all those questions from investors. And of course, the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish their response on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to the company, Hugh, could I just ask you for a few closing comments? Yes,
indeed. So we set out a plan in 2021. We're delivering on that plan. That plan involved commercial grade manufacture, enhancement of our SFX01 chemical matter, producing a tablet that's enteric coated, that is different from the research form we were using before, and that releases in the right place in the stomach consistently and produces high levels of active ingredients in the blood. We've done that. We set out a plan to deliver a study in glioblastoma, the nastiest of the brain cancers, one of the biggest non-accident killers of young people under 40 in the Western world. We're delivering on that plan, and not only that, given the financial needs, we're delivering it in a non-dilutive funding way. So with the Erasmus, we've consulted very widely with the key opinion leader group in glioblastoma. The best way to do it is the way we're doing it, and we're doing it with 900K of free project money routed via the Erasmus Medical Centre. We said we would exemplify our business model with a deal. We've done that. We've got a $160.5 million milestone deal with a very good partner in autism spectrum disorder. And of course, partnering is an almost constant activity. Talking to people, assessing whether we are of common interest is a constant activity for any small biotech, and we're very busily doing that. We are encouraged with our cash runway, which is at the best end of companies of our type of industry, and we're continuing to look for more sources of non-dilutive funding, as well as any other complementary technologies we might look at. So an exciting year in the past, and an even more exciting one in the future, with some potential milestones coming, with some more powerful data coming on this asset that seems to repeatedly develop interesting data, especially in this whole area of sensitizing to radiation. So we're really excited about it. We are busily pushing ahead with every one of those streams of activity. And we thank you for your patience with us in a difficult market. We thank you for investing in EVGEN.
You, Richard. Thanks once again for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the board can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the board of EVGEN Pharma PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's meeting, and good afternoon to you all.